Hi everybody, my name is Victoria. Welcome back to my channel, and this is the video that we've all been waiting for. Actually, literally everyone else on BookTube has posted this video already. I feel like I'm the last person to film theirs, but this is my top 5 books of 2022. I decided not to include 10 books. I see a lot of top 10 books of 2022 videos going around, but I actually didn't read 10 books that I loved. That's how crappy of a reading year I had. Like, truly. I think I gave like maybe 3 or 4 books 5 stars. It was the slumpiest reading year, but I also just had a really transitional kind of year with a lot of turbulence in my reading and my personal life, and we just didn't read that much. So I have top 5 to show you today. I think that's the best way for me to do this year. Hopefully next year I'll have a better reading year and I'll be able to do a top 10 video, but I'm only gonna share 5 books with you today. And you know what? That's fine. They are 5 solid books that I would highly recommend. I'm gonna go from number 5 to number 1 on this list. And so we're going to start with number 5, and that is Something Wicked This Way Comes by Ray Bradbury. I am surprised that this book made the list of my top favorites. I was not entirely expecting that when I read it. I don't think I thought it was going to make the list, but then when I looked at my list of books that I read in 2022, I felt like it was better than some other books. So here it is. This book is about a creepy traveling circus, which is really not my usual read, but this one really worked for me because of Ray Bradbury's writing. It was a very peculiar writing style that I think you either will jive with or you won't, but it was like poetry. That's really what I liked about this book. The story is also intriguing, but it's a bit of a fever dream of a book. So we follow these 2 young boys, and kind of one a little bit more than the other, but you really follow both of them. And one of the kids' fathers is also really an important character in the story. And this traveling circus comes to town, and they kind of the boys figure out that it's a sinister circus, and that the circus has some not great intentions for the town, and it's all about figuring out what this traveling circus group is doing and how to stop them from what they're doing. And that's all I'll say about it, because I feel like I would spoil it if I said any more. But I really enjoyed this book for the just atmosphere. I think this book is filled with atmosphere, and it is like an atmosphere that you can chew on, and I just thought it was well written and well put together. And there would be a sentence that I would come across that I would just have to like sit and ponder and chew on, because I thought it was either like a beautiful sentence or just really intriguing, and like there are many layers in his sentences oftentimes, and I just really had a good time with this. So I feel like this is maybe my most surprising book on this list, because I didn't expect it to be a favorite, but I think I really like it, and I think I want to read more Ray Bradbury. Number 4 on my list is also kind of a wild card book that I picked up on a whim, but this is a nonfiction book about music, and it's called This Is What It Sounds Like. I'm actually completely blanking on the authors, which is terrible, and I didn't write them down, but I'll put a picture of the book here for you. In this book, we get information and tidbits about the recording industry. The female author of this, and I can't remember her name now, but she works in the recording industry, or worked in the recording industry. I think she's mostly a professor now, but she worked on some really important albums, legendary albums. Probably the biggest one that she worked on was Purple Rain by Prince, and so she was one of the recording engineers or producers or something, I don't remember, but she has, first of all, just really interesting things to say about the recording industry and about some of the artists that she worked with, and she has some interesting stories, which I really enjoyed. But she also talks about music itself and what makes us like the music that we like. She breaks down musical elements and, for example, like melody or rhythm or timbre. She talks about different musical elements, and I thought the way she talked about them was really good for educating people who like don't know exactly what they're talking about when they talk about music. So it kind of, I felt like, gave the reader a little bit more vocabulary for talking about music, and I think that's a really valuable skill to kind of like break it down like that. And while it wasn't like new information for me, if you don't know, I have a master's degree in music. Music is actually my career. So while none of that was new information to me, I liked how she constructed her arguments, and I liked how she wrote the book. And I found her and her stories and her voice just really fascinating. And it made me want to pick up more books about music. And I feel like I haven't picked up nearly enough. So that's kind of maybe a 2023 goal, or in the future, something that I can look into, is reading more text about music. But this is also chock full of music examples. I think there's also a website tied to this book where you can take like an online survey or online quiz. I know I read about it in the book, but I didn't actually take it. But it's about like to give you an idea of your listening habits and what might drive you to certain music genres or certain artists more than others. So it is just a really fun interactive book. I did really enjoy the listening examples and how much she just encourages you to explore. I thought it was well written. I would definitely recommend this book if you've never read a book about music before. I think this is a really good one to start with if you are interested in diving into music as a subject more. We're getting down to the top 3, and surprising me again, I didn't expect this to be in the 3rd place, but the more I thought about it, I think it belongs there, and that's The Man Born to be King by Dorothy L. Sayers. I'm not surprised that Dorothy L. Sayers would make my list, but this book in particular, I think, grew on me the more I thought about it and talked about it. This was for a December Advent read-along that I did with Christy Lewis, Dostoevsky in Space, and also Carla from Raised to Walk, and also Emma from The Bookish Princess. And we all read this together and had a live show, and I know a bunch of you joined us too. And so we just had so much fun talking about it recently. We had a live stream on New Year's Eve, and it was just really a delight. This is a play cycle about the life and times of Jesus Christ, and it goes through from his birth to his crucifixion and resurrection. And while I have some nitpicks about it, I think my nitpicks, it doesn't take away from the quality of these plays and the vividness. They really paint a picture of the gospel stories. And I also liked how Dorothy L. Sayers also kind of infused some of her own ideas or theories about what people might have been saying, what the government would have been talking about, what the Romans would have been discussing with each other, what the disciples would have been talking about. She has some interesting ideas also about Judas and his motivations, and it wasn't in like a shocking kind of way where it's like, oh, that's not from the Bible at all. Like, it was still, she took the text and she just like enriched it a bit, and I liked how she enriched it with her own theories, and it was just beautifully done. The last couple play cycles are really emotional and definitely had me tearing up, and I am a little bit sad I didn't listen to it because it was actually designed as an audio play. That was the intention, but I really wanted to read it physically. But I think it would be a fun one to revisit in Easter, or leading up to Easter, for Lent, and maybe I'll listen to it that time. But in the spot number 3, The Man Born to be King. Apologies for my lighting, by the way. The sun is going down, and I didn't know exactly what it was going to look like, but I needed to film this video. If I don't do it now, it's not going to happen. So I'm sorry about that. The lighting might get a little funky. But going on to number 2, this is not a surprise. I knew this was going to be on my top list of favorites, like somewhere, and that is the short story collection of A Good Man is Hard to Find by Flannery O'Connor. Flannery O'Connor was most certainly a master of the short story. If you are not familiar with her, she's Southern, dark, and religious, I would describe. If I had to pick 3 words, her short stories are all set in the South. That is what she knew. And she's from Georgia. That is the setting that she writes from and what she writes about. And her stories are very dark and visceral, but they are also infused with religious themes. And she was a devout Catholic as well. So that's kind of where we're coming from with Flannery O'Connor. There are many more things I could say about her, and I don't think that description exactly does it justice, but I will just say her short stories pack such a punch. They kind of like disturb me, and also they make me think in a way that I've never thought before. I actually read some of these short stories out loud because my husband and I were on a road trip to San Francisco at the time. It was like the first week of January that I read some of these in 2022. And I read a few of these short stories out loud to him, and then we just like had the most deep conversations about them because there's so much to chew on. They are tragic, many of them, and shocking, and they just are unlike anything that I've read from anyone else. Flannery O'Connor is just such a unique writer to herself, and she was so authentic to herself too, and what she wanted to say and what she wanted to expose. She really exposes a lot about society and about religious people, quote unquote, and she kind of exposes the ugly underbelly of society and Southern society especially. And she's just fantastic, and I'm so glad to be reading her more this year. So it had to be high up on the list. I went back and forth between if this should be number 1. I feel like it definitely could be number 1, but I'm putting in number 2 this time because my number 1 is a book that made me absolutely sob, and I haven't had like a emotional reaction like that to a book in a long time. Like, I was so distraught. So the book that broke me and is in the number 1 spot now because it just wrecked my heart is Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin. I'm surprised. I'm just as surprised as you are that a new release book made it to my number 1 spot. No, I was just kidding. I just expected, like, I don't know, a classic or something to make it to that spot, but no, this freaking book, it broke me. It was sad, but also beautiful, and I think that's what spoke to me about it. I feel like this book is everywhere. It's all over Instagram and Book Talk and whatever. Actually, I don't know if it's on Book Talk because I'm not there. I'm not on Book Talk. This book was picked as Book of the Month's Book of the Year also, and I did get it from Book of the Month. And I was really excited that it won because this book connected with me so strongly, and really unlike most books that I read this year. So this book is about a friendship between a girl and a boy, and it's not a romance. It's actually, I thought it was a romance going in. I thought it would be, but it's not. It's more about friendship and their relationship. They are video game designers, and they are basically colleagues, co-workers. They become really big with their video games, and it kind of talks about and shows how success can affect relationships and affect the way that people see themselves and people act towards others. So that's one of the themes. Definitely mental health is a big conversation in here as well. It's also about creativity, and that part also really stuck with me and moved me as far as what it had to say about being a creative person and what that means for you and your life and how you relate to others and how you relate to the world. There's so many great themes in this book, but I feel like at the core of it is about the creative process and how the creative process can also help you deal with your own mental health struggles and your just dealing with the world and the ways in which creativity is an outlet. I just think this book has many layers to it, and I liked the themes that it tackled, and it broke my heart. It's really heavy and sad. The problem is, if you look up trigger warnings for this book, you get a major spoiler. And so while there is some pretty intense stuff that happens in this book, I almost would say try not to look up trigger warnings because you will get spoiled for something. You have to make that choice for yourself if you pick up this book, but it is really it's a book that I would like to reread. I also thought Gabrielle Zevin's writing was really beautiful, and I liked how she weaved the story. I think I also liked this book because it's so character driven and character focused. It's very much a character study, and I think the people that didn't like this book thought it was slow, and it is slow. It is pretty slow, actually, but it does pick up, and I like a slow book if I can connect to the characters in that deeper way, and I felt like this book was just perfect for me. And then I also really I like video games, and this was talking specifically about like video games in the 90s and early 2000s, and that was a time that I was playing video games a lot with my family, with my dad and my brother. And so some of those like obscure references to video games of that era, I played some of those, and so I liked that element of this book as well. So there was just like everything that worked out well for me. I don't think you need to know anything about video games to read this. I think actually you will learn something about like how they're made and stuff. I definitely learned a few things as well. I thought Gabrielle Zevin just handled that content really well, and she didn't make you feel like you were dumb if you didn't know anything about what they were talking about. She does a good job of like explaining it in the text as well. But yeah, I don't know what else I can say about this book. I loved it. And I will totally reread it someday, most likely. Those are my top 5 books of 2022. 2022, again, was not a great reading year for me. And so I think there's a couple books on this list that I think in a normal year wouldn't have made it. I think they would have been a little further down the list. But they made it this year, so it's all about comparing it to what else you read, and I feel like this is my list. So I would love to know, what is your favorite book that you read in 2022? I would love to know so that I can add it to my never-ending TBR. And thank you for watching. If you made it all the way to the end, go ahead and leave a, I don't know, like a little, is there like a champagne glass emoji or something? That may not exist. Leave an emoji that makes you think of New Year's. How about that? So we'll get different emojis. If you made it this far, thank you so much for watching. I post videos every Saturday, or at least I'm trying to. Thank you so much for watching. I have some other social media links down below if you want to follow me in other places. Until next time, bye friends.